What is up, Mets'd listeners? Episode number 64 of the Mets'd podcast coming at you a little late. The boys are a little buzzed. We went out and we celebrated. If you're watching the YouTube video, just give a fist pound on camera because we signed Max Scherzer to a 3-year, $130 million deal. The money is insane. Uncle Steve, we'll get going into it, but you know I got to do my spiel first. If you guys are not following us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, at Mets'd, I swear we're going to start posting on TikTok. I promise. It's going to happen. James is going to learn how to edit it too because I'm lazy. We're also going to post a YouTube video. We're back. Mets'd on YouTube. You'll be able to find us there. Post some YouTube content. We'll be running the YouTube game real strong. And then if you're listening to us, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find us, you'll be able to listen to us. Give us a 5-star rating. Give us a 5-star review. Whatever you got for us, it really does help us grow. James is sitting right here, so I don't really need to bring him in. But James, I mean, we've had some drinks. 5, 6.
Why would you even say that?
7? Because I feel like it makes it a little more fun. This is this is a genuine reaction to Max Scherzer because we just went out drinking to celebrate Max Scherzer.
We've had something of a 24 hours with the Mets'd podcast, starting out with our debut on Spaces on Twitter last night.
Let's just talk about that real quick.
What an incredible time that was.
If you guys aren't following me and James on Twitter personally, Mets'd podcast, whatever, that's fine. Follow me and James on Twitter personally, at GiraffeNeckMark, at Jeter Had No Range. We've been using the feature that's called Spaces on Twitter, and we were the #1 Spaces the last 2 days.
Yes, literally on the entire Twitter interface, we were number one. Number one.
Not 2.
1.
Not 3. Not 4. Number 1.
And it was just a hoot and holler and good time.
We were on there from 9 a.m. to 2 a.m.
PM.
9 p.m. to 2 a.m. Yeah, that's the other time I mentioned. See, we're drinking a little bit. We were on there for quite some time, and we had 4,700 people in there at one point. Not to toot our own horns, but we figured something out.
We really did. I think we kind of perfected the concept of sports talk radio and mixed it and moshed it with the Gen Z era that we live in.
Yeah.
Brought it to modern social media. We created this amazing ecosystem for just talking about baseball that really turned into something of just, I don't want to exaggerate, but literally a spectacle.
Yeah, no, if you guys, I can't vouch for this enough. I think Twitter Spaces is a really cool feature that they've added. I seriously hadn't used it up until this past week. I know you were talking about it a little bit earlier in the week with me, and I experimented with it. The growth is unbelievable. The growth is phenomenal. But I think it's a really cool place for you guys to also interact with us. This is something we're going to do. You're going to see it tonight that the episode drops.
Yes, Wednesday evening before the CBA deadline.
Tuesday evening. It'll be before the Wednesday midnight deadline. But if you guys have a Twitter, if you don't, I suggest you make one just for the Spaces thing alone. You'll be able to listen to us react and talk live before the midnight deadline about all the moves that are going on. Apparently the Mets are done, but I don't believe that for one bit. So we will see what's going on, but we're able to drag you guys in, hear your thoughts and opinions, get your, voice in there and give it with our opinions as well. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it, as well as it's always cool to be one of the top guys. We had the Mets in there hanging out. We had the Morgan Wallen.
Country music superstar.
We had Jabba Chamberlain. I didn't expect that name to be in there. And apparently Bob Nightingale himself was able to listen in on when we were just ragging on him nonstop.
Definitely, and that's fair. I mean, Bob Nightingale probably understands where he stands in the social media landscape. We also had a couple people from Fangraphs, Baseball Prospectus.
We had The Athletic in there.
The Athletic Baseball was in there. Yeah, we had a couple of newsbreakers pop in with us. A couple of people from a couple different podcasts. The Astros, Locked On Astros.
Yeah.
We had Vinny Parisi from Fansided.
Locked On Pirates as well. We had all over the place.
Nick
really
Pollock
cool.
from Pitcher List. Can't forget that. Seth's with his family barbecue jumped in, talked to us for about 5 minutes.
Doesn't follow either of us.
No, he still does not follow either of us, which was pretty rude.
That's
we'll
a call out.
out.
That's a call out.
Yeah.
We expect to follow back at some point.
Again, but even past all of these people who have relative notoriety, it was really nice to connect with a lot of you guys who've been listening to us during this entire past 8 months we've been doing this now. And it was pretty nice to connect with everyone and actually hear people's voices and be able to go back and forth, because that's what Twitter Spaces does. It allows everybody to have an equally shared voice, and being able to share ideas and kind of talk, debate, compare and contrast ideas was a beautiful thing.
And it was a perfect mesh with the fact that we were waiting for Max Scherzer to sign with the Mets, which is what we're talking about tonight.
Yes.
This is an emergency short episode, which are back-to-back emergency episodes. Oh, no, what are we going to do? These are two of the biggest moves, two of the biggest days that have happened in recent Mets history. We signed Max Scherzer to a 3-year, $130 million contract. I can't stress that enough. The money is massive. It's record-breaking. It's historic. And not only do we get a very good player, not only do we break records, we got one of the best pitchers in all of baseball on the New York Mets. We've seen him pitch for the last 5-6 years with the Washington Nationals. He's now pitching for the Orange and Blue. It doesn't feel real.
No, it doesn't feel real. It was also like a little bit of an extra bonus that we got to break the Yankees AAV record with Garrett Cole, just shove in everybody's face that we are now the Kings of New York officially.
The Mets run New York.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
This is our city. The Empire State Building hasn't been lit blue and white. It's been lit orange and blue recently. Maybe for the Knicks, maybe not the Mets, but that's not Yankee colors. That's Mets colors.
Definitely not. And the one thing that everybody out there really needs to make sure that they understand is that Max Scherzer is still an ace in this league. There's no doubt about it heading into the 2022 season. Max Scherzer is a top 6 at worst pitcher in all of Major League Baseball, right?
Yeah, it really comes down to what you're looking for, what you're valuing. Projections, of course, you always project the younger guys to do a little bit better than the guy going into his 37-year-old season. But even then, with the projections, Max Scherzer, I really do think conservatively, I don't know where the B came from there, at worst, is a top 10 pitcher in Major League Baseball. That's probably the worst he's going to pitch this year, barring anything catastrophic going on. He was so good with the Dodgers last year. He was so good with the Nationals. There's a reason he's getting paid $43 million at 37 years old. His talent is immense. He doesn't need the youth to be that effective pitcher. While, throwing 96, 97 miles an hour is really great. And something
94, 95.
Yeah, he still sits in that mid to high 90s, though, I feel like
he's
at times.
He's going to average probably about 95 next year. And that's what he did last year as well.
But he's still got that devastating slider. And the changeups, he's just one of the best pitchers in baseball. If you're a Mets fan, you've watched him pitch against you for the last 5-6 years. He's unreal. And you now get to pair him up with Jacob deGrom, who are two of the 3 best pitchers of this generation, no doubt. There's no debate. We're watching 2 possible Hall of Famers pitch for this New York Mets team in 2022.
I think they're both 2 Hall of Famers, right? There's no
I think
reason they're not.
Scherzer's a guaranteed.
Yeah,
I think DeGrom probably has to do a little bit more just because of how the Hall of Fame is very traditional and how they look at counting numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you're talking about the 2010s of baseball. These are 2 pitchers that are 2 of the 3 first names mentioned, and Clayton Kershaw is the other one. And they're both pitching for the Mets in 2022. And they're both going to be sick. If you were in the Spaces the other night, we couldn't believe that we're even linked to this guy. And now that it's real, it still doesn't feel right. I don't know about you. It still feels fake.
I don't disagree with you. It definitely doesn't feel right. And the question we kept asking people on Sunday evening, early into Monday morning, was that, what was your confidence level that the Mets would sign Max Scherzer? And kind of to my shock, we had a lot of Mets fans who were super optimistic even before anything happened that we were going to get him. I personally thought this felt a lot like Trevor Bauer last season, where the Mets were kind of being jerked around by an agent and a team on the West Coast, namely the Dodgers, and that they were just kind of being used to drive up certain value. And honestly, it did feel like that even into Monday morning. I woke up, again, today, Monday, just stricken with anxiety that this was not going to happen.
Me and you, I think we're both around that 50-50 percentage last night of, they could sign him 100%. We know we got the money, but it really comes down to whether or not Scherzer wants to be here. And if the money is true, if the money talks, bullshit walks. That's the big saying. Steve Cohen just whipped him out and said, mine are bigger than everybody else. This is something that he got burned with a little bit last year, and you brought the Bauer thing. There's so many parallels to this contract, besides the age. The age is the one different thing that separates Scherzer and Bauer. But the parallels are there in that it was the Mets versus the Dodgers, and it came down to who's going to pay more money and who's going to give it to him. There's reports around the league that when Max Scherzer heard the offer that the Mets were giving, his jaw dropped. Max Scherzer, I don't even think thought he was going to break records this year. And the Mets came out, they might have even outbid themselves with this offer, but they broke records on a relatively older pitcher, but I also don't care.
No, I don't think you really can care when you're pulling in an ace. There's not really any inherent value you could put on an ace pitcher coming to your ball club. Again, this is something else we reference on the Spaces. Max Scherzer, his entire career, at least since he became good those last 2 years, the Tigers, right before he signed that contract with the Nationals, always been worth at least $40 million a season. Again, dating back all the way to 2015, based on Fangraphs' F-WAR. So there really wasn't a number that the Mets could have, or that Max Scherzer and Scott Boras could have said that the Mets would have said no to, because they just had to have him, and that was the end of the discussion.
Like, it's so refreshing as a Mets fan that we were the top bidder on a top free agent. I mentioned it last night too when we were talking. I hate to keep referencing it. It feels like a broken record, but like, there have been so many big free agents that we've missed out on because we had the Wilpons. We had Harper and Machado, who both those guys would have slotted in beautifully in Queens in any position.
And both those guys were absolute locks to fulfill the value of their contracts, especially over the first 6, 7, 8 years or so before either of them could have even possibly broken down.
Which is really what you pay for now. When you do these long contracts, you pay for the first half and hope that the second half is okay.
But we've learned over the last couple of seasons in Major League Baseball that the aging curves that we once thought were true aren't necessarily even true anymore.
Especially for that elite talent.
Yes.
Because a guy like Albert Pujols, it's a little weird because he lied about his age. I'm confident in saying that. He's not 41 years old. He's 46 or however old.
Which is impressive. That he's still doing this at 46 years old.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yes.
He is one of the greatest baseball players, no matter what. Any way you slice, I don't care what his age claims to be. He's as old as Octavio Dotel, who's been out of the league for 10 years, and he's still performing at Major League Baseball levels. But it feels like when you are some of the greatest players of all time, which is some of the guys that we're talking about, Max Scherzer is one of the greatest pitchers of all time, 3-time Cy Young Award winner, multiple-time ERA titles. You watch this guy pitch, he commands a different respect than everyone else around the league. There's very few people that get that respect. And he's now a Met. To me, there's no doubt in my mind that this was the right move to make.
Oh, there's not even something of a shadow of a doubt. The old saying has gone over the last few years. I'm going to steal this quote from Eno Saris on the Rates and Barrels podcast, is that there's no such thing as a bad one-year contract. And that is still true to this day, no doubt about it. I can't wait to give Rich Hill 1 year, $5 million.
Oh, it's going to be to have Rich Hill around Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer.
And Tyler McGill.
I want to have a beer with those guys.
No, especially maybe just Rich Hill.
Maybe just Rich Hill.
I don't know if I want to have a beer with Max Scherzer. I'd be a little afraid.
I'd be so interested to see what that guy looks like outside of a baseball uniform. I'd love to. He's
a weird, scraggly gray t-shirt.
Big cargo shorts guy.
I bet he just wears the same pair of jeans all the time.
Is it a loose fit or is it a tight fit?
It's a very regular fit.
Okay, that's fair.
But to my point, what he said, I'm going to take this quote right now because it's very smart and it's very true. And I love Eno Saris, one of my heroes of the game.
Smart guy.
Brilliant. There's no such thing as a bad one-year contract. We know that. But now the way that the baseball teams go about valuing players, and the way that we know how baseball players, one, age, and two, deteriorate, especially guys in this elite tier, at this point, it's kind of no such thing as a bad 3-year contract. As long as we get one seriously elite year from Max Scherzer, that one of those really good 2.8 ERAs, 6 F-WAR season, 225 strikeouts, 190 inning seasons, this entire contract is worth it. And then the rest of it's house money. And I'm expecting the rest of it to be house money after the season, because there's nothing that Max Scherzer has done in the last few years to think or to show us that there's any deterioration going to happen.
The Mets are trying to win a World Series in that 3 to 5 year window span that Steve Cohen said. And getting a guy like Max Scherzer puts this team in a way better spot to win a World Series. Now, I think both of us agree that we are not a World Series team at this moment.
No.
But as we were talking about this team more and more tonight at the bar, we were going, I mean, granted, this could be the drinks talking a little bit. Could be, but hey, we're having fun. This team is really good. And getting a guy like Max Scherzer is just, I think on the field, we know the value he has. He's going to be great. But I really do think that off the field and just the value that he can bring to this team with his experience, with his knowledge, with the just prestige that this guy carries, he will not accept below average play. He is not going to stick around and see this team play like shit. He's not going to see them struggle. He's going to try and pick this team up, and that's something that we thought that this team lacked last year.
Definitely. I don't think Max Scherzer would have signed this contract if he didn't think the Mets could compete in that fashion over the next few years. This is probably the last big contract Max Scherzer will sign.
100%.
Right?
Max Scherzer's retiring as a New York Met.
Hopefully. And he does have an opt-out after the second year, correct?
Yeah, which would be... he's going to be 40 years old. And he's
That
going
would
to be
almost
turning down 42
It
million.
would almost be the best case scenario for Max Scherzer to have pitched well enough to opt out at that point. Even past that, the last year that we've been doing this show, we've talked about the Mets roster. We've really talked about how their depth is something that is good and that we've like championed that. We kind of always knew, and we always allude to the fact that there still wasn't enough top end talent to really bring them to the promised land. That was a big reason the Mets wanted to sign Francisco Lindor. As good as the Mets' bottom of the roster seemed to be, and as good as some of the homegrown talent was, the Mets didn't have that 5 or 6 win player in that roster. That kind of player that really, that really lifts the rest of a roster to becoming elite. And that was something they had to fix. That's why they acquired Francisco Lindor. They had Jacob deGrom. You lost Jacob deGrom last year. You saw how much that deteriorated the entire team's production and success.
It's a huge weight off the shoulder of Jacob deGrom. Huge.
Definitely. And it's much harder to acquire that elite 5-6 win player at any position than it is to acquire the tiny little fillers that fill the roster, the 2 to 3 win guys that fill in. And now the Mets absolutely have a strong foundation of multiple players who are elite, who are among the best in baseball, and who will absolutely lift up the foundation and keep them at a place where they can compete to at least be in the playoffs. Again, as the roster currently stands, we don't know what the rest of the moves are going to be like. Things are going to go quiet very soon. But with Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer on a roster just reaching the playoffs, we saw this year that basically anybody can win a World Series.
Yes. And
that just getting to that point, and you need the whole regular season to get to that point. You need to play 162 games to get to that point. You need a lot of people working together to get to that point. Having these guys at the base will give you a much better chance of getting to that point, and having these guys at the base will give you much better chance of going past that point.
It's just unbelievable that we're going to watch Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer be 1-2s. I mean, in a given series, you have 2 of the best pitchers in all of baseball going up against a given team. I like our odds to win a series against any team in baseball. Any single team, I don't care who it is. I don't care what the matchup is. The Mets have a good chance to win every single series when those 2 guys are out on the mound.
Just to give you and the listeners juxtaposing hypotheticals right now, let's say the Mets are a team during the season that maybe struggles with health because it's a little bit of an older roster. That's something that's definitely possible
for sure.
The Mets' range of outcomes. And let's say they do wind up falling a little bit behind the Braves and walking into a wild card game against, I don't even give a shit who. We don't even need to give the hypothetical.
Not
right
important.
Now. The Mets will, no matter what, I can probably say, have a pitching advantage, a starting pitching advantage specifically in that wild card game, which will give you a good chance to win it. And a big problem that a lot of wild card teams face in the modern era when they go to the division series is that you've burned your ace and now you're kind of playing catch up against a team that's sitting there waiting for you with their ace in hand. The Mets have 2 of them. Even if they do play in one of those games and burn an ace, they have another one ready to go, and they'll have the second guy ready for game 3. So you at least win one of those games. You kind of have a 50-50 shot in the middle. There's a good chance you're winning that series already. And then to even go on the back of that, let's say the Mets sign more players. Everything goes perfectly. We perform at our 80th, 90th percentile of expectations this year. Let's even say we have better records than some of the teams in the National League West or National League Central, be it all teams in the National League East. The Mets somehow have become the number 1 seed in the National League. You are waiting for that team to come from the wild card game. Unless that team is the Brewers or the Phillies, the only other teams or I guess the Dodgers, I guess. Well, a lot of these playoff teams probably will have 2 aces. But
I think the Phillies is a little bit of a stretch.
I know, but I'm talking about 2 teams teams that have 2 elite starting pitchers at the top. And again, I'm being kind to Aaron Nola. I'm a big Aaron Nola guy, probably bigger than most people in baseball right now. But you will be sitting in the catbird seat in that playoff series with 2 aces in hand, ready to just absolutely put somebody in the dirt in the first moment possible and blow through and get ready to win a series. That's how you go to the World Series. That's how the Mets did in 2015.
No, this team is going to be built around pitching right now. Like the offense, we grabbed some good pieces, 100%. The offense is getting stronger, and I think the offense is better than it's going to be last year, without a doubt. The guys, Lindor's going to have a bounce back season. Guys aren't going to have the down years that they had last year. But this pitching at the front line, at the absolute worst, is 100 times stronger. I love Stroman. I love the guys that we picked up last year. Stroman's not here right now. I'd love to bring him back. Mm-hmm. He'd be an unbelievable number 3. Sick number 3. But even having Carrasco and Taiwan now as this 4-5 or 3-4, and then McGill. I mean, just having the guys of deGrom and Scherzer who are going to go 6, 7 innings minimum every 5 days, back to back, by the way, back to back days. is so powerful. It's so strong.
To push back on that for a second, I think another big part of the Scherzer signing is the fact that the Mets now have the opportunity to possibly ease Jacob deGrom into the season. I can really foresee a world where Jacob deGrom is only throwing 4 or 5 innings for 6, 8, 12 weeks as we start the season, possibly into June, even up until the All-Star break, just depending on the health of his elbow that we know is still pending.
Yeah, we really don't know anything about it.
Don't know anything about it. But the fact that we actually have an ace who can be on his level, which is a shocking thing to say, but it is true at this given moment, to take the pressure off of him and not put him in a position where he has to win every game he starts, to the point where he's busting his ass and throwing with 120% every single pitch he throws in the game, just to take it easy. And again, even with that, easing a guy like David Peterson back in the rotation. Once we get going in the season, easing a guy like Joe Lucchesi back into this rotation, easing a guy like a possible signing I mentioned before, Rich Hill, into the rotation early in the season. Having Max Scherzer as your safety net and your foundational building block helps Jacob deGrom to reacclimate himself much more effectively than if he was not here.
Jacob deGrom is, of course, the best pitcher in this rotation, but Max Scherzer is another piece of glue that is no longer just Jacob deGrom, that this rotation doesn't have to rely on. You give another incredibly strong arm, it just takes so much pressure off of everybody on this team right now on the pitching side. It's unbelievable. And I think one of the things we have to address is the pay. It's 3 years, $130 million. It is the biggest contract given to a pitcher for AAV ever.
Or a player
ever. He's getting $43 million at age 37. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people are concerned about. A lot of people are worried about. All his peripherals are still elite. And here's the thing with Max Scherzer. Here's the thing with the Mets. Overpaid is not a word in our vocabulary anymore. The Mets and Steve Cohen have just shown that money is not it's not a worry in the slightest. You just paid the biggest contract to one of the older players on the market. Nobody cares. Overpaid is poor people words. Those are poor people terms. I'll say it again. If you say the word overpaid, that's because you come from a team who doesn't have the money like the Mets. And I can't even believe I'm saying that right now.
No, definitely. But again, those are all fun things to say, and it really does feel comfortable to say the things that we can. We're rich now. The Mets are rich. We can spend any money we want, any player in the world. The fact that this player was Max Scherzer is meaningful. And now I'm going to give a little pitching breakdown because I'm sure everyone's been waiting for that. It's been a couple months since I've given one of those.
Here we go, James. Give it to us.
But a guy like Max Scherzer, when you think about a 37-year-old pitcher, you're thinking about signing a guy in his twilight who is kind of on the descent. And there's nothing that Max Scherzer has done would really make you think that. Max Scherzer's velocity in his fastball has been steady for years. Literally, basically his entire career. He's always been a guy who sat between 94 and 96 miles an hour.
Yep.
He did that last year. Max Scherzer, his entire career, is a guy who sat in the high 20s, low 30s in K rate. He has actually increased that dramatically in the last 4 years of his career. Last year being a 34.1 strikeout rate guy. And every year since 2017, he's been hovering around that 34, 35% number. So that's something that really hasn't gone down. Same thing with his walk rate. Max Scherzer in his whole career has been a guy between 4 and 8% walk rate. Again, that's kind of a wide range, but that's because he's been oscillating a lot. Last year was a 5%. 2019 was 4.8. Every year between 2016 and 2018, he was in the 6s. That's coming down. Usually when a guy ages, you kind of expect something to go wrong. And for Max Scherzer, it hasn't been command, which is something that we can really hang our hats on as Mets fans. The one thing that Max Scherzer has deteriorated in a little bit is his home run rate. He's kind of leaving the ball up more. And again, I'm talking about command. He's not walking guys, but there's leaving pitches that are a little bit more hittable in certain parts of the strike zone, especially in the middle or up. This is something he struggled with last year.
But even then, even in his prime with the Nationals, he was still giving up close to the top of the league in home runs.
Absolutely. Well, that's because Nationals Park, based on Statcast's park factor, is one of the easiest ballparks to hit home run in all of baseball. It's in the top 5. Last year, we traded to the Dodgers midseason. It's also easier than the average to hit a home run. Citi Field is a much easier park to pitch in than either of those. While Citi Field's park factor for home runs is a little bit higher than league average, it's well below Nationals Park, is moderately low but Dodgers Park, and overall for all other hits, extra base hits in general, it's a better park to pitch in. So we can kind of expect some regression from I almost said Noah Syndergaard, Jesus Christ, from Max Scherzer's home run rate while coming to Citi Field, which is something that I think we can be very confident about.
And I think not to mention too, the Dodgers, great defensive team. They always are. They're always super strong. But the Mets have one of the better defensive infields in baseball. And we just got really, really strong in the outfield too defensively, adding Starling Marte and Mark Canha. The Mets are not just getting Max Scherzer, but they're putting a great team behind him, which is really, really valuable. And I know James just gave you all the stats, but you guys have watched this guy pitch. You don't need to be a scientist. You don't need to be a mathematician to dissect the numbers to understand how good this guy is. He is a dude you watch and you understand he is one of the best pitchers in baseball.
No, definitely. I'm nitpicking right now because there are going to be people in your life, people in our lives, who are going to tell you the Mets overpaid for a 37-year-old.
That's poor people words.
Absolutely.
I don't want to hear overpaid.
Something's going to go wrong, but I'm really telling you statistically, there's nothing that seems like could go wrong. And then another thing, Max Scherzer has just kind of been the staple of health for most of his career. He had a very small injury this season, missed 2 weeks, but other than that, this guy's an absolute warrior, a psychopath.
He's nuts.
And he's committed to being on the mound every 5 days, which is something that in the modern baseball landscape is inherently valuable.
He brings a different edge to this team. He brings a different kind of a winning nature. He does not want to lose. He is not interested in losing. He wouldn't sign with this team if he didn't think that they would be good. You mentioned that earlier. Max Scherzer is here, one, because he got paid a lot of money.
Tons.
But two, he knows that this team can do something. He knows that this team has potential. And I truly believe that with Max Scherzer a part of this roster, the Mets can really make some noise in Major League Baseball. And I'm super, super happy, super grateful that we have an owner that just spent this amount of money on a guy to try and make this team win, because really, we have not seen this in our lifetime, at least since 2005, 2006.
No, definitely. The word's euphoric. And we were asked that last night on Spaces, to bring it up again. Is this the most optimistic you've ever felt about the Mets? And I said resoundingly, yes.
Yeah, I said the same thing. Granted, we were 10 years old in 2006, so a little bit of a different time, per se, as us for a Mets fan. But the most recent optimistic time, I know I pick the Mets to win the World Series all the time on YouTube, but that's for entertainment purposes. 2016 is probably the last time we really felt that optimistic. And even then, this team is miles better than that roster.
I wouldn't say it's miles better than that roster right now, but I think that based on the foundation of the roster right now is a chance to be miles better than that roster.
See, I do think we have a more complete team than that roster.
Really?
I think I think sometimes us Mets fans forget how offensively inept that team was.
Yeah, that is kind of true, but that team's starting pitching
was elite.
It's something we can't really rival right now, even with these two monsters at the top.
We might have the better top end stuff right now than that rotation, because DeGrom was not the pitcher that he was.
He was still really good.
He was still
Harvey
very
was
good.
the pitcher DeGrom is.
Yes, Harvey was the guy at the time, and Syndergaard as well. Those were the two studs of that rotation for sure.
And Zach Wheeler.
And Zach Wheeler was a little bit still at the time.
Pretty good.
He was very strong, but I really do think that top to bottom, that this team is one of the strongest teams that the Mets have fielded in a very long time. And getting a guy like Scherzer just proves to at least the Mets fans that they're going for it. They're not content with just being okay.
Definitely. And I think that the biggest thing that this Scherzer move signals is that there's no way the Mets are done this offseason. While we're about to hit this horrible, catastrophic blue balling lockout in a few hours, this does not mean the Mets are done signing players. And then I think that's how we're going to transition right now into how we're going to move towards the end of this episode. We're not going to wrap it up yet. We don't do 30-minute episodes. Messed up podcast. We can't. It's not possible. But I think there are still some minor holes that the Mets need to fill, or I would say some moderate holes the Mets need to fill.
Yeah, I mean, a number 3 starter. Again, it's really semantics at this point, because
it's not semantics. I mean, who's your number 3 starter right now? Carrasco?
Yeah, I mean, you're going Carrasco or Taiwan, and I'm sure a lot of people in the Mets world would be okay with Taiwan or Carrasco being 3. Maybe not Carrasco, maybe Taiwan more.
And I
so.
think that's almost the opposite of what should be true.
Correct. I think that we do need another starting pitcher. There needs to be at least one legitimate one signed. I'd love to bring back Stroman. If money's not an option, which it seems like it's not going to be, he would be just unbelievable at the number 3 spot, but I don't think he's coming back.
I would literally kill to have Marcus Stroman a part of this rotation. Marcus Stroman has caught a lot of heat recently because of things on social media. I have to stress to myself, to you, to the Mets fans everywhere, that we really can't look too deep into what goes on outside of the baseball field if we're looking at players who are on it. I think there's not one player who currently exists on the open market who can raise the Mets ceiling more than Marcus Stroman right now.
Yeah, especially on the pitching side, which is probably, again, our biggest glaring hole. We kind of, I know you're not the biggest Eduardo Escobar guy to play every day at third base.
No.
But we do have a third baseman right now.
Mm-hmm.
We do have one with at least him and J.D. Davis combined. That's our third base spot right now, I think.
Theoretically, but I don't know how different Eduardo Escobar and J.D. Davis really are to the fact that you can call them complementary pieces, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. But I do think that right now, the way that this offense is looking, the starters are kind of in place. You're okay with going into the season with those guys. Right now, we at the absolute worst, let's just pretend that we're going to use Taiwan and Carlos Carrasco as 3-4. We don't have a 5-starter.
No, we do not have a 5-star at all. But we also don't really, and I'm contradicting myself, as I said 3 seconds ago, pitching was the biggest concern. Marcus Stroman could raise the ceiling the most. We still don't really have enough like definite difference makers in this offense. Because right now, you look at the Mets lineup up and down, it's really just Alonso and Lindor as guys who you can absolutely say are beasts, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah, I mean Nimmo too.
Nimmo too, but I need to see Nimmo play 150 games. I'm not taking anything away from Nimmo right now. And I've said time and time again, you're injury prone until you're not. I believe in Brandon Nimmo. I think Brandon Nimmo is going to be a very good player here for a long time, but I still would like to see him do something over a longer sample to make me fully believe that he can be like an all-star caliber player.
Yeah, the thing to me that I like about the way that the Mets are built right now is that we're currently talking about J.D. Davis, Jeff McNeil, Dom Smith, a lot of the guys that we thought would get significant playing time last year as the role players, as the guys who are going to fill in. And to me, something that we talked about at least a lot towards the end of the season was that the Mets were not utilizing the 26 men on this roster. And right now it feels like we are trying to get the most out of it. We had a center fielder in Brandon Nimmo. If he was our center fielder on opening day, I don't think any of us would have complained. He was very good last year.
No, definitely not.
And we went and got a guy like Starling Marte, went and got a guy like Marcana, and now Brandon Nimmo moves to a corner, and we have a complete outfield.
Yes, for the first time, literally in our adult lives, the Mets have a complete outfield, which is kind of a shocking thing to say. But I am still a little bit worried about those two positions, as in second base and third base. I do believe in Jeff McNeil. I do think Jeff McNeil can be a very valuable player for this team. I've said time and time again, I don't know if the Mets can win a World Series if Jeff McNeil gets 600 plate appearances.
Yeah, and 600 might be a little much, but we do also have Robbie Cano, don't you know?
I know. We're not going to forget about Robinson Cano. And I'm sure that Robinson Cano, any time in his life, next 25 years, can roll out of bed and hit 280.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
He still does have talent, despite, maybe a couple injections to the left buttocks and right buttocks. But it's really hard for me right now, and maybe this, again, is this euphoric high because of the Max Scherzer signing, something that we just haven't seen really in our lifetime. Carlos Beltran's probably the closest thing to it. And maybe Cespedes because of the high that we had from him from the playoff run.
Yeah.
But we have not made a move on the free agent market of a player that wasn't a former Met. We signed Piazza to that big contract. That's the other one you think of when you talk about big Mets contracts. This is just, we brought in an outside guy to this team that is going to immediately, right now, make this team a scary matchup.
In our last episode, we talked about the Mets kind of reworking their foundation and changing their culture. I don't think you can do anything more to change a culture and to turn it into a winning one than bringing in someone as intense and as historically successful as Max Scherzer. He now, without Javi Baez on this roster, is the only player to ever win a World Series.
Yeah.
And while that is like some kind of old head baseball thing that guys probably are not used to someone like me saying, or you guys probably are not used to me saying, there is something that makes that a little bit meaningful in the end of the day, right?
Scherzer, I said it earlier, he will not accept subpar play. He won't do it. And maybe this is something that, some guys in the Mets aren't used to. The Mets, for most of these guys' careers, have been the lovable losers. There's kind of no way about it. They rally a little bit, everyone gets behind them, and then they kind of peter out. Maybe Scherzer's the guy who turns it around and goes, guys, we're not just going to be good. We're going to be the best. I demand the best, because if you're not trying to be the best, why are you even playing?
Yeah, and I think the Mets kind of need that swift kick in the ass. That's something we talked about a lot during the 2021 season. The Mets kind of lack that intensity and fire.
That leadership. A lot of people, didn't like Rojas for being that mellow guy. I know we don't have a manager right now, which is super funny to talk about because we're hyping up this team about, being contenders, and we don't know who is going to be the manager. But when you have a guy like Max Scherzer, it's like having another manager per se, or another leader at the absolute worst on the field. I know it's hard to have pitchers be that guy, be that voice, because they really do only appear every 5 days. But if you talk to people around the Nationals, if you hear everything that anyone's had to say about Max Scherzer, this guy is a leader, and I do think he commands respect around the locker room, regardless of whether it's his first year, his first day, his 10th year on a certain team. He demands respect.
Definitely, because he's one of the best players who's ever played this game, this generation.
Yeah.
There's something that things that Max Scherzer has done. I don't know if we'll ever see them be done again, at least not in the magnitude that he's done them. Like, there's a guy who, for the last 10 seasons, has been consistently in the top 5 of the Cy Young, top 5 in F4 for pitchers. Like, there's no stopping him. But we've talked about Max Scherzer for now 35 consecutive minutes
Yeah.
of what we thought would be a short emergency episode. I want to go for about 5 more minutes talking about what we think could happen next. Even though none of it's going to happen next, this is a futile thought exercise. But posted the poll before the Mets'd podcast. It was about who would you want on this roster, you guys Mets fans, between Javi Baez and Marcus Stroman if years and money were the same. And the answer was overwhelmingly Javi Baez, 72% versus 28%, which shocked me truly to my core. And I think a lot of that could possibly be because people are just down on Marcus Stroman, the guy right now, the social media personality.
I think it's a little bit of down on Marcus Stroman for his personality, but I also do think that people are taking the Scherzer move as we don't need more pitching. I really do. I think and this is no disrespect to anybody that's listening, but I do think for the average fan, when you hear that we have Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer, you go, how much more can we take?
Yeah,
how much more do we need? Right? Because
absolutely.
I mean, you think ahead and you go, and even in a 7-game World Series, those guys are pitching 4 games.
Definitely, but at the end of the day, the Mets have to go about how many innings this season? 9 times 160?
160. You have to play 162 games, and as we've seen for the Mets for the longest time, it doesn't matter necessarily what you do for those 40 games that you have your best pitcher out there. You need to be able to dominate the season, and in order for us to do that, we need a complete pitching staff. We have 1, 2. We have 4, 5. We need that 3.
Definitely. At the end of the day, you got to throw about 1,500 innings to get through a major league season. Right now, best case scenario between Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom.
360?
Yeah, exactly. So we got to find 1,200 more innings around there.
And granted, we have bullpen too that's going to eat up,
For sure,
a good chunk of the innings as well. But
there needs to be someone who comes into this team who we can count on. It may be a collection of guys too. I imagine Rich Hill. I know I can count Rich Hill for 100 innings.
Oh, yeah.
I love Rich Hill for 100 innings. We have to find probably about 200 more innings from this free agent class before the offseason ends if we really want to feel confident about reaching the playoffs. Because before you get to the World Series, you got to get to the playoffs.
Yes, and I think that's super important too. Like we're on cloud 9, we're high, we're happy, we're feeling great,
buzzing.
But we gotta think again. We gotta come back to earth, and I think the Mets are luckily going to do the exact same thing and regroup what needs to be done. And there is still work that needs to be done. This team is still not the best team in baseball. No. And if Steve Cohen truly does want to build a World Series champion team in the next 3 to 5 years, like he said last year, you need to be the best team in baseball on paper going into every single season.
Yeah.
And right now, the Mets don't stand like that. But I will say we are in a hell of a better spot than I thought we were going to be at, November 29th.
Monumentally better spot. Like, this just comes down to the fact that the Mets need.
And while people think Javi Baez is the most important player, and I think that Javi Baez might end up coming back to the Mets over Marcus Stroman, I don't think that they're necessarily wrong in that poll of picking who will come back.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're wrong in saying that he is the more important player, that hitting is more important than pitching right now, because pitching still wins championships at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Even though we, especially the two of us, kind of shat on the Braves during the season about not having enough to win a World Series or even get to the playoffs or just even being better than a mediocre team. By the time they got to the playoffs, they still had 3 pitchers who were pitching every 5 days very consistently, giving them innings and putting them in a position to win the game, giving their bullpen a rest and making sure that they were ready to win when the situation came about.
And again, front 3, Morton, Ian Anderson, Max Fried. That's one of the best front 3s in baseball.
It was. And kind of shockingly, it did turn out to be that way.
Yep. And the Braves won a freaking World Series because of it. 100%. I know Soler and Duvall and Peterson and Rosario kind of get the press about being the moves that the moves that help make the Braves win the World Series. But along with the shifting, those guys' pitching numbers all of a sudden started to get a lot better.
You look at the year before, Dustin May and Julio Urias came out of not left field, but they definitely came out of a place that people didn't think they were coming from to really clutch up and win a World Series for the Dodgers. The year before that,
even Tony Gonsolin that year.
Yeah, pitched a lot of very important innings in the playoffs. You look at the year before that, Patrick Corbin just really nutted up and won some games for the Nationals. Steven Strasburg pitched the best baseball he's ever pitched.
Anibal Sanchez had great outings for the Nationals.
Multiple great starts. And of course, our guy Max Scherzer came out of nowhere. The way that modern baseball works, while we have diminished the value of starting pitching on a grand scale, there's absolutely no doubt that you need lots of it to actually reach a place that we want to get to. This is all fun and games, but you're not winning a World Series in November. At the end of the day, this rotation, 1 needs to stay healthy, and 2 needs to get stronger before we actually head into the season.
Yeah, and I think luckily for the Mets and, for us Mets fans at home, there's a lot of room to improve. And there are a lot of guys still available that we can go after, whether it's through free agency or trade market, that will make this team better. And I fully expect them to. I do not think the Mets are done.
No way the Mets are done. I think that there's a really good chance that the Mets look towards either some of the frontline guys still available, like Carlos Rodon or Marcus Stroman, and even past that. Sadly, Alex Cobb was signed today. Everyone pour one out for me. I was devastated this evening when that news came out that he was a Giant, but Michael Pineda is pretty underrated. You can sign him for very cheaply, and he will throw you innings, and he will miss enough bats to probably be okay for an extended period of time. Tyler Anderson is a guy who will go out there every 5 days and compete. He won't be exciting. It won't be fun to watch Tyler Anderson pitch. You'll probably see some really bad games. You'll probably see some really good games. You'll see that. But this is just the kind of guy the Mets really need. You say Kikuchi. That's not a sexy name.
I was just about to say, all the names we're going to mention are not sexy. There's only a few sexy picks left, and even then, like, the sexy scale is, about a 7 out of 10. You're not looking at, any Kate Uptons out here. But
No. It's Rodon and Stroman.
Yes, it's Rodon and Stroman. These guys are meat and potatoes.
Yeah.
But listen, Mets fans, we're a little bit of meat and potatoes.
100%.
The Mets have never been the sexy team by any means, and I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon. But we can go ahead and make this team the best meat and potatoes out there. And a good meat and potatoes dinner, I'm going there every night.
Love meat and potatoes. 30 degrees every day right now in New York City. Some nice beef stew, a couple potatoes in there. That fills you up, keeps you warm.
A nice borscht. Borscht. A nice, what is that, Polish?
Ugh, that's a disgusting word.
Borscht?
I hate hearing that.
Not a big borscht fan?
Ugh, no. I might like to eat it. I don't like to hear it.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe we'll just beef stew. Well, let's be the best beef stew that the Mets can possibly be.
Definitely. Like a name like Zach Greinke sounds disgusting, but wow, would he throw 180 competitive innings for them?
Let me tell you, if Zach Greinke could get over his anxiety and come to New York, which, like, it's real.
It's the Mets. It's not the Yankees. It's the Mets.
That's true. But it is a real anxiety, and it's probably...
I'm not belittling Mets alone.
Yeah, it's probably the biggest long shot out there, honestly, that Zach Greinke comes to the Mets.
You think?
I truly believe
you think
that
that's bigger than Clayton Kershaw coming to the Mets?
I think it is.
Wow.
I just think he has no interest in being in this major market like that. But Zach Greinke, I mean, that guy would give you 180 innings right there. He would be the consistent. He would be so key to the consistency of this rotation. There are guys out there that exist, and we will be able to find them. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait a couple months, but...
Yeah, probably, at least.
This Mets team is in a really good spot right now going into this long break where we're not stressing. We're not stressing, and that's really nice.
No, the opposite stress. I kind of feel amazing. We actually have a good opportunity. No, we don't. The Mets organization has a very good opportunity now to be able to stop and collect themselves after a pretty insane couple of months. That really should not have been. There's no reason October and November should be insane for a team that won 78 games in the season, but the Mets do get to stop and take a breath, really look and take stock of who they want to manage this team, who they can really scout and find value among the starters, the infielders, possibly the outfielders, the relief pitchers that are still in the market, see where the value, again, I say that word, is going to come from, and just gather themselves and make very coherent decisions when this lockout inevitably ends.
Huge shout out to Billy Epler. Me and James have said from the start of the offseason, prove us wrong. Proved us wrong.
Definitely proved us wrong. He really just bodied this.
And I'm so happy to be wrrong.
As
we said in the episode about it, so happy that Billy Epler made us look stupid, made us look like fools, because it means the Mets are better. And I'm happy that the Mets are better.
Mets are a lot better.
They really are. So I think that is a perfect time for us to wrap up episode number 64 of the Mets'd podcast, an emergency episode. Max Scherzer is a New York Met. Hold on.
Emergency is the wrong word.
I'm dying.
This is a fun emergency, which isn't an emergency.
This is a celebratory episode. This is a celebratory episode. I like that, James.
Celebratory episode of the Mets'd podcast.
Good call. A celebratory episode of the Mets'd podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching Mets'd podcast. At Messed Up on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Messed Up Podcast on YouTube. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Shout out, we're almost a top 10 podcast. Number 12 on all of United States baseball. So huge shout out to you guys.
Let's get to 1 tomorrow.
Yes, let's get to 1. Messed Up Podcast to 1. That's what we're tweeting right now. But all the new followers, all the new supporters, all the new listeners, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting. Follow James on Twitter at JeterHadNoRange. Me, myself, Giraffe Neck Mark with a C on Twitter. And we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Check us out on Twitter Spaces tonight that you're listening to this. And we'll see you all probably next week for another episode of the Messed Up Podcast. Peace out, guys.
See you next time.